signal now for when I'm needed. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning to them.
Yes, sir. Welcome to the Gotham Chronicles Beyond the Bat Signal. I am your host, Dominic Unica. Join me as we dive into the depths of Batman's lore, dissecting the Rogues Gallery, and uncovering the stories of our iconic vigilante known as the Dark Knight. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode, where we're going to have basically a double header and cover Penguin episode 6, Gold Summit, and then episode number 7, Top Hat. Now, before we begin, I want to thank each of our listeners for tuning into today's episode and following along. Now, you can catch all new episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. I've seen a lot of people listen on Xbox, which blows me away. We even have a YouTube channel. So tune in wherever you'd like. And please leave a rating. It goes a long way to help spreading the word. And not only that, subscribe. It really does help the channel out. Now, with that being said, also, if you want to follow along, feel free to follow along at X/Twitter at Beyond Bat Signal. And yeah, that's about it. We're going to get into this episode. Well, we'll start off with episode 6, and I won't linger too long about this one, but let me tell you, it was quite the episode to start off with, where we notice a big time, well, not a big time jump, but you can still tell it's winter time, and basically Oz is getting right into it, getting his hands deep into things. You notice Sofia's hair changed. She got a haircut, and the relationships start to build between her and Sal Maroni. Now, with Penguin, we notice him. He's slowly starting to do things like trying to help the city, right? Like, based on where they are in Crown Point, where, it's like the slums, right? Like, that's where Oz grew up. That's where Victor grew up. And, Oz's mom, you hear a lot about where she doesn't want to be here. She wants no part of Crown Point. This is where she was supposed to leave and leave it all behind her. And Oz kind of reassures. He's like, listen, I know, because there's no power. There's no light. So they're using candles, and they're trying to use what looks like it was like something that was gas powered, right? And just to kind of heat up the place and get something to cook food, give some power, and it helped, right? So Oz obviously confronts one of the city workers or someone for the government. I'm pretty sure it was Councilman Haiti. Anyway, visit his car, parks it nice and close, and then he's got nose pliers. And sure enough, he makes good use as to what the name is and puts it right up his nose as he's about to kind of chop it off, and threatens him, saying, listen, I want electricity, because there's certain of the poor areas that are not being taken care of, and it needs to be done by morning, which eventually does get done. There's also a lot of opening moves like that. You just kind of see what Oz is doing to move this bliss drug. So it kind of starts with Oz putting himself in a position where, one, he's getting this drug to get moved constantly, and he's telling everybody, listen, if anyone asks, you're construction workers, right? And then you kind of get a scene with the Maroni Gigante family, which are under the roof of, I think it was at the Falcone's house. So, and here they are, they're having like a little bit of a discussion in terms of Sal's wife and like what he learned from his wife in terms of, recipe and cooking and whatnot. But yeah, like, and you could tell that in Sal's face, it really pains him that he lost his wife and his son because he obviously loved her. But then there's also struggle, right? Like, you look at Oz's mom, or I love how he says, just says ma, right? Where there is her mental and physical health, right? Which is slowly worsening. And, Oz is in an emotional state. Like, at one point, like, you have Victor trying to approach Oz with a situation where basically he's confronted by squid, and Victor's trying to talk to Oz, and Oz's mind is elsewhere, and Victor's trying to get some advice as to how to handle him, which we obviously see how it's handled later on in the episode. But with Oz's mom, it's weighing on him mentally, and it's bugging him, right? And you slowly see things like walls are starting to crumble, like, and it's going to be one big showdown. It's going to come down to Sal, Maroni, Sofia, and Oz, right? And it's kind of who's going to win, right? But with Sofia's plan, it's pretty clear, right? So for her, it's terrorize anyone that's loyal to Oz. So she starts digging around. Her and Sal go into where Oz used to live, in that little, I guess it was his condo, it looked like. And they start looking for anything or anyone that was valuable. They see some pictures of his brothers. And then, I love how Sofia kind of meant, and like, Sal's like, who's this? Right? And she's like, oh, those are his brothers. He died a long time ago when he was a kid. And his mom has passed away a few years ago. So she's under the impression that Oz's mom is dead, right? But then they go into Oz's room and they see a picture of Eve, which is going to come back and bite him. So, where do I go from here? Because I really want to just get into the nitty gritty part of it. But Oz does make the moves to kind of get power going back, and it benefits him because in his underground lair, he's got his operation being built with the bliss drug and trying to spread it out. They're making money. You're seeing the money kind of coming in, and he needs the electricity as well, right, for these guys to work. So, and it also benefits people that are living there, like his mother, right? She doesn't want to be freezing while he's kind of in hiding. So we have Sofia confront Eve, right? She's like, this is probably the one person that's valuable to Oz. And she goes there based on, it's almost kind of like a setup, right? Which Eve kind of knew that Sofia was eventually going to be looking for her. And it was one of Eve's girls that says, oh, I've been waiting for you, and shows her exactly where Eve lives. So it kind of felt like when Sofia knocked on that door and she had the gun pointed directly at that door, it kind of felt like Killing Joke, to be honest. So as Sofia goes in, they start talking, and Eve pours herself a drink, and they start talking. And the one thing that kind of comes out that caught Eve off guard was, well, and this is what Sofia said, was, I'm not the hangman killer, right? And it was my father. And on top of all that, you think you know Oz, but you really don't. Like, he was the one who knew about the killings of those women and didn't say a single thing. And the thing was those women are who Eve knew. And here's Eve, who's having, I guess it's somewhat of a relationship with Oz. And, and she's trying to stay loyal to him. But how do you stay loyal when all these girls are getting killed and it's by a man, and Oz is covering up for Carmine Falcone, right? And obviously it really bothers her. So they have this discussion, and then Sofia spares Eve's life. And as Sofia begins to leave, Eve just says, Crown Point. She's like, excuse me? And Eve basically said, I'm paraphrasing here, that's where you're going to find him. Crown Point. So Oz then is obviously like, not knowing what's going on. He's obviously working overnight. And then you have Sofia show up Well, actually, no. There's Victor. Him and Oz's mom, Frances, are having like a little bit of a moment. She's sitting down. They turn on the music and then they start dancing. But before that kind of happens, if you rewatch that final scene, Vic turns around and notices like he hears something right behind him, and he's just like, "What's going on?" Not until after he's kind of redirected by Frances again to start dancing. So they start dancing, and then in the background you have Sofia just lurking in the background, waiting with the crowbar and ready to F shit up. And that's how the episode kind of closes off. And you're just like, what the heck? Right? Like, oh my God, I can't wait for next week. And let me tell you, episode 7 was a doozy. But I want to touch upon Victor's, basically his dark choice, that what happened, right? So I mentioned that Victor tried to approach Oz about talking about, like, how do you handle this individual? How do you handle this person that's giving him a problem? And Victor had to make his own choice. Oz didn't really give him any advice, right? So here he is being cornered by Squid and is threatened, basically like, listen, you need to show me where his operation is. So first off, Victor tries to pay him off, and then all of a sudden, Squid's just dropping the cash. He's like, I don't need this, basically telling him. So as they're going and walking, you see that Victor's holding a gun, and right away they start walking towards this little hideout. Victor turns around and freaking pops him, shoots him right in the neck, and man, I had to turn away when I saw the blood just gushing out of Squid's neck, and he dies. Right? Now, there's a little bit of evidence of blood on Victor's foot, or on his shoe, and he tries to wipe it off. And then eventually goes and talks to Oz, and Oz confronts him and just basically tells him, listen, and he knows by the eyes, like, Victor just looks like there's a lot of remorse in his eyes. And Oz eventually just says, listen, it gets easier, hinting that there's a bit more of a darker path that Vic is going to follow. Like, it gets easier. Like, yes, that's your first kill, but after your second, your third, and your fourth, it's going to get a bit easier. And another key point, which I kind of loved, right? And I know I mentioned the closing scene that left you on a cliffhanger, but I can't forget about the Gold Summit part. So basically, Oz is organizing a pivotal meeting between Gotham gangs, right? So he brings Zhang, I think that's his name, all these other gang members into it, right? Like, who is it? Even the Irish mob. But anyway, they bring in a bunch of gangs in, and he basically has this like closing speech as to rallying the highlights of how all the elite families, like the Falcones and the Maronis, have all exploited smaller gangs for years, pushing for unity to challenge. But he's saying, like, listen, let's all unite here and then challenge Sofia and Sal Maroni for their dominance. And let's all have each other's backs, right? Saying, like, listen, you've been forgotten. And then the line where he looks at one of the guys, he's like, he doesn't even know your name, right? So he gives everyone a beer, kind of looked like he was like Stone Cold Steve Austin, holding those beers for about 15 minutes while he's talking. I've never seen anyone like hold a beer for that long and not open it. But that rousing speech, oh man. And then by the end of it, they're all just cracking open a beer can, and it comes down to Zhao or Zhang. I can't remember. And they eventually just lift up that beer and start drinking to it. And that was like that, their agreement that they're all going to stick together. So that pretty much sums up episode 6, which I would say I was floored with. I was flabbergasted of how good that episode was. I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. Like, it was so well done. But let's get into episode 7, which was called Top Hat. So the episode doesn't waste any time whatsoever and kind of shoots off with Penguin, and he's arriving. He looks right up at the building. He's like, nice, they did it. And it's all lit up really nice. And then as he's going into his the apartment, and he notices that the door is cracked open. And the first questions he's asking is, Ma, you here? Where are you?" And the place is trashed. He's looking around, then eventually he sees Vic on the ground, passed out with blood down his right side, and he's like, "Vic, wake up! What happened? What happened?" And Vic basically tells him that Sofia came and took Francis. So he hears all these cars showing up. He looks out the window, and I'm referring to Penguin. Looks out the window, and he's like, "It's Sal and his men. They're here. So Victor, you need to get out of here and recruit all the guys, or this is going to be an all-out war." So Victor goes out through the window, and Penguin, or Oz, is just waiting for Sal. And if you notice, there was a golf club that Sal Maroney picked up when he was trashing Penguin's first place, and it was with a golf club. And sure enough, that's the golf club that he beat Penguin up with. Nicely across the chest, down the back. It looked painful. But, you're always going to have Oz, who's going to be chirping back and giving it right back to him. So anyway, and then they do like a little bit of a flashback scene where they have Oz and you see his brothers. And, they kind of pretty much right away the camera points to Oz's his leg, where you could tell that there's like a brace on the left side, and you could tell he has a good relationship with his mom. Maybe it's a little unhealthy, but mom seems very sweet. She goes and plays like zombie with her other two boys, but then the camera kind of goes back to Oz, and Oz just looks a little jealous, right? And it seems like, this little relationship that Oz has with his mom at such a young age is just, it's off. It's a little weird. It's almost like he loves the attention from his mom, and he doesn't want the attention to be towards his brothers whatsoever. So basically, Francis asks Oz and I think it's Benny and Jack. It's his two other brothers to go, and they have to drop off these books to Rex Calabrese. So we finally get a nice little introduction to this mafioso gangster, Rex Calabrese, who's got his cigar and his slick back hair and his gold car. And we kind of get a nice little look at it. And Jack seems, who's the oldest brother, he looks like he's in high school, like a little scared of him. And then here's Oz, who's just looking at Rex with complete admiration. So when Jack drops off the book, and then Rex asks, "So how's your ma? Take good care of her." And then they slip him some money. And then after, they kind of go their way. They go under the tunnels, and they were about to play flashlight tag. But before they do, they were having a discussion as to their mom is way underpaid for what she does. And $50 is not enough. Meanwhile, here's Oz saying, "Are you kidding me? That's $50." But anyway, they go and they play flashlight tag, and Oz is it. And they're underneath the tunnels, and Oz is starting to look for his brothers, and then they notice that, there's a tunnel, and then there's another tunnel that goes way below, and you need a ladder to get down. And then Oz has a brace around his leg and then down his foot. So his brothers are hiding, and Oz is yelling at them I can't get down there. So Oz attempts to go down this ladder, slips, gets really upset, and then all of a sudden, the kids are like, "Okay, listen," the older brothers are like, I'm sorry. And Oz just "We'll see how you like it down here and try to get out." And he shuts this door. And sure enough, there's a big, huge rainstorm. And it's basically an overflow as to where all this water is going. And Oz just leaves his brothers there. And he goes home. Unbelievable. And the thing is, and this is what is so twisted in Oz's mind, you got to believe that there is some sort of mental health here. He just leaves him to die. right? Like they look out, like once Oz gets home to his mom, and his mom's asking like, where are your brothers? And they're like, oh, they went to the movies to go watch Beetlejuice. So obviously it's not the Beetlejuice that just came out. This is the one that came out in '88, which I love that little bit of tidbit of information, because it's like, well, we're gonna go watch Michael Keaton and Beetlejuice here. Kind of cool. But Oz kind of looks out the window, and then there's another scene where you're hearing the brothers like, Oz, let us out, Oz, let us out. And then you could just hear them like, not gargling, but like just blowing bubbles just to breathe. And by the next morning, it's just quiet. And that's how his brothers die. And that's dark. And I'm not sure if it was episode 5 or 6 where Oz tells Vic, like, the city took my brothers, but really, it all was Oz who killed them. I don't know, man. That was a tough one to watch. But yeah, and here you got like Oz has his ma all to himself now, which I don't know. I'm pretty sure he's happy about it, right? He doesn't have to share his mom with any of the brothers. And he tells his mom basically lied to her, saying like, they were at the movies. I don't know what happened. Now, there was another, I'd say, powerful scene. Like this, I feel like this episode was just so packed with excellent acting and just a lot of attention to detail the way it was filmed. And everyone brought their A game. So Francis is then, you're having like this little confrontation or discussion between Francis and Sofia. And Francis is just powerful, and she thinks so highly of her son, where she's telling Sofia, like, when my son finds me and he puts a bullet through your head, like, this is what she's saying, and it's full of confidence, and she totally believes in her son. But that little tidbit of information that I just loved is where she's like, Francis is saying to Sofia, I'll be tap dancing over your grave. And right in the beginning of the episode, Oz and Francis are watching. This is younger Oz. They're watching this. I don't know. I forget the name of the movie or the show, but it was a tap dancer wearing a tuxedo, Penguin reference, but they're tap dancing. And it's just beautiful that she's just saying, I'll be tap dancing over your grave. But afterwards, then, as we know, Francis Cobb has Lewy body dementia, which, and I'm Google searching this one, but it basically kind of gives like hallucinations, and confuses the mind, and kind of based on what the person living with this disease, right? And it mixes things up as to like, at what point in time they're actually living. And as we saw in, I think it was episode 6, or was it 5? Now I'm getting them all mixed up. But, Oz's mom makes Oz promise, like, listen, if, to the point where if my mind isn't right anymore, you need to finish me. You need to end me, right? She refuses to be a vegetable. Now, with that said, she's in the same room as Sofia, and it just seems like she gets a flashback as to her and thinking about her sons, and it's almost like she was talking to the cops as she's looking out the window, thinking, my kids, they said that they were going to the movies and they didn't come back overnight, and it's been raining all night and no one saw them at the movies or the arcade. And then it looks like Sofia starts to warm up, like kind of feeling bad for Francis, and then boom, Francis just gives a wicked backhand to Sofia, who, as a character, man, these last couple of episodes psychologically have been deep. And, you focus on Sofia and like how this is just a tragic story. And even Penguin in another sense, where he's got his own mental health issues. But with Sofia, like, you just can't help but feel bad for her. And to what she's been dealing with and going through. And then, she does have a soft side, right? She is definitely not her father. But, she is, to be honest, like, based on the comics, a force to be reckoned with. But here, it seems like she wanted to feel They wanted to console Francis, and boom, like Francis just, no, I refuse. She's one tough cookie, let me tell you. Now we get like a discussion or a conversation between Sofia and Dr. Julian Rush. That guy bothers me so much. But anyway, I wonder what his role is, or who he's going to be, or if he's just going to simply be Dr. Julian Rush. But he was informed that, like, listen, there's someone, a doctor, that's been looking at Gia, and she's got some information that she wants to pass along to the police. And it's a female doctor that's, or a psychologist that's been talking to her. And my mind immediately goes to, is it Harley Quinn, right? Probably isn't, but you never know, right? Like, I think all of us just kind of assumed Harleen Quinzel. And but Dr. Julian Rush is encouraging Sofia that you need to go and handle this. And unless he's like, do you want me to? And she's like, no, I'll go handle it. So she goes and visits Gia and has this conversation with her, saying, like, you know, what you saw. But Sofia just kind of reminds Gia that, listen, their family were terrible people, and she basically did them a favor. And then you get a glimpse to Gia's arms, which they're all scratched up, and it looks like it's self-harm. And immediately just turns on a light into Sofia, but like a dark light, where she starts to feel remorse and she starts to feel bad. And, you know, and it's just like it brings her down a dark place, where when Sofia was in Arkham and she started to harm herself, and she was starting to scratch her neck. And, you know, you can tell that Sofia wants to be there for Gia and just support her, but she can't, obviously. And then she's going to go to a better family. One of the big doozy parts was, for me anyway, was Oz versus Sal Maroni. So they square off. Obviously, Sal's kind of he's got Oz hostage, and then obviously Oz kind of finds his own way out, where he's looking at his men, and they turn off the lights, and then you have Oz and Sal just going at it, and then they're into that little train. And, you know, they're going punch for punch, and they're just kicking each other's butt. And then to a point where you hear Sal start to breathe heavily, and he has a heart attack, drops dead, dies. But before he dies, Oz starts to remind him, I beat you, and then shoots him a couple more times just to make sure that this guy's dead. Brings him out and says, Sal Maroni's dead, I killed him, right? Making sure that everyone knows that the Penguin is the one who killed Sal Maroni, and it's him that's going to be the one taking control. So he lets everybody know. He goes, and the other important thing was, like, Oz needed to feel that power, like, and tell his mom, yeah, I was the one who killed Sal Maroni too, right? Because if he just goes and tells everyone, well, I was fighting him, and then the guy had a heart attack, he's gonna look weak, right? So yeah, like, he had to let Sal know before he took his last breath, I beat you. He shoots him, shows everyone that I killed him, meaning like Penguin or Oz. And, you know, it makes him feel tough, empowered, right? He takes off, or Penguin takes off Sal's ring and puts it on as his trophy. And then he goes and makes a phone call to Sofia, where she's feeling at her lowest, leaving the room that she just talked to Gia in. And obviously she's rattled because she's seeing this poor kid go through mental health herself. And it feels like the exact same thing that Sofia went through. And Penguin's like, listen, I want to exchange. You can have everything. You want the drugs, you want the operation, all of it. Then you can have it in exchange for his ma back. Now, as we're nearing the end of this episode, you have Julian Rush, who's got like these 3 lights that are just flashing back and forth, and it looks like he's doing work on Francis Cobb, when Sofia walks in and just tells her to shut it off, turn it off, and she talks things over with Julian Rush about, like, listen, I'm ready to just give it in. We'll do a straight up trade. She's like, this whole time, Oz is right. Like, I've been wearing a mask, right? She's like, I'm not my father. I don't want to be my father. But, like, what change really am I doing? All I'm doing is just changing my last name. Like, it's nothing. So then you can kind of tell that Sophie's got some like PTSD where she's doing some heavy breathing and she's like struggling to get the air out. And basically, it's just like, how do I move on from all of this? And the only way is to try to end the penguin and, or kill Oz and make him suffer. But then she kind of comes to this conclusion, like, I'm going to do exactly what he did to me, make this guy suffer just like he did to me. Now, the final scene we have where there's a car that's coming through the tunnel. Looks like it is a G-Wagon that's coming through this tunnel. And Penguin tells all his guys, hide, which is, come on, like she's going to buy that. And so Sofia calls him and basically tells Oz that, she has Ma with her, and Oz starts opening up the doors, and there's no one in the front, no one in the passenger seat, no one in the back seats. And then Oz opens the back door, and Oz is so scared that and Sophia's saying, I'm going to do exactly what you did to me and feel pain. And it's going to be right in the heart. And Oz is so scared. So he opens up the trunk and he looks, and I immediately thought Sophia or Frances is in the back and she's dead. And he lifts up the cover, and sure enough, there's a bomb with like 18 seconds left. And she's like, you might survive if you have time. There might be enough time if you survive to get out. And he screams out bomb, and he finds, and it's the exact spot that he left his brothers in to die. He opens up this door, closes it, slides down that ladder, and kaboom, the whole place just explodes. And no, you don't see Frances Cobb because she's still with Sofia. And then Oz kind of like, he wakes up in a daze, covered in dust, right? It looks like the street is just completely destroyed. And then we get a good look at one of the cops that Sofia hired in episode, I think it might have been episode 1 or 2. But anyways, that dirty cop that Sofia hired and goes, oh, you survived. Has this like huge weapon, I don't know what it was, and whacks Oz right across the face and knocks him out. And then in the meantime, we have Sofia at the Monroe's club where she's obviously holding Frances. So it seems like this is going to set up a banger of a finale to see, like, how's Oz going to get out of this one? If he does, what's going to happen to Frances? My wife was watching this with me, and she's just like, well, Victor's still out there. And they do make reference, like Oz was like, hey, did you get in contact with Vic? And he's like, oh, no, it keeps going straight to voicemail. So, it was my wife, Victoria, who was pointing out, just like, probably Vic's recruiting all those guys, all those mobsters that they had at the end of episode 6 in Gold Summit, and they're going to probably come and help save Oz. And that's going to set everything up. But who knows? I thought that was a top-notch episode. Like, that was A+. And I don't know what's going to happen. What's going to happen to Sofia? You do feel bad for this tragic character, right? Like, did she really want this life? Definitely not. But it's a life that she's choosing. And she just wants to get rid of all this pain and just wants to be free. Who knows how this all ends? It's so good, though, and I don't want it to. Like, we're episode 7 of 8. There's 1 week to go. It's been an amazing ride. I don't know how you guys are feeling, but I'm loving this series. Definitely going to do a rewatch once it's done. But, yeah, I'd give that I feel like this whole season's been a 9.5 out of 10. And really, I'm just being nitpicky. I don't even know what I would find wrong with it. But, kind of curious. I've seen online that it's like, oh well, if this is all going on, like, where's Batman? Like, listen, episode 8 hasn't happened, and do we really need Batman in it? No, maybe he's handling other issues. Who knows, right? And I guarantee you, something like Batman Part 2 is going to answer these questions, right? Like, this is a big universe if you think about it. We got Oz, we got Sofia, then there's people like the Riddler, who's out there, or in obviously Arkham. Joker's in Arkham, or is he out? Who knows, right? Like while Penguin is doing his thing, like is Batman even paying attention to what's happening with Penguin? Because there might have been something else going on in Gotham that we're not paying attention to, right? Really curious as to where this goes and how this ends off, and I'm loving every minute of it, man. Now, with that said, I think that's going to be pretty much this episode of episode 6, Gold Summit, and episode 7, Top Hat. I thought it was a doozy. Curious to hear your thoughts, so feel free to shoot me an email at beyondthebatsignal@gmail.com or follow along at Twitter/X, Beyond Bat Signal. And that is it, man. Like, cause listen, I'm hooked on this show. I have no idea how Penguin's just gonna simply get out of what he's got himself into. Who's gonna survive? Like, we see Sal's dead, and it's basically down to the two juggernauts. And is it gonna be Sofia? I think Penguin's obviously gonna make it out because he's confirmed for Batman Part 2. But what about Sofia? Like, Kristen Milotti has done an excellent job as a villain in this series. And it's someone that you kind of feel sorry for, but you want her to lose. You want Penguin to win. I love how the job that Penguin's been doing, or Colin Farrell's been doing with the Penguin, and how quick he is on his feet. Like, I just love the accent. Like, there was one part I was just talking to my wife about. It's in episode 6 where you have one of the scenes, and it was like basically the news showing some of the guys hanging, but with also a cut off finger, right? So hangman, cut off fingers, like, Penguin style. And here you got Oz Cobb saying, Jesus, Sofia, pick a lane. Like, I laughed out loud at that. That was so clever. I don't know, man. Anyway, that's it for today. Follow along. I got a review coming up on Batman The Last Halloween issue number 2. That's also going to drop I'm pretty sure this week. And I will be also making an appearance on a certain podcast that I have made mention to multiple times on here. And he's also been a guest on the show. I am sure you can take a wild guess. And Peter Rivera has named him Brian Lauer, but we all know that's not his real name. Now, that is all for me today. Thank you very much for listening. And this is Beyond the Bat Signal, signing off.